The chapel at St. Jude's was steeped in silence, broken only by the soft crackle of paper as Marcus Jones unfolded a weathered letter. At 32, he stood with quiet strength before a sea of familiar but distant faces. None more so than Blake and Harrison Richardson, his adoptive brothers, who sat tensely in the front pew. Before I share my memories of Richard and Elizabeth Richardson, Marcus began, "There's something our mother wanted you to know." For days earlier, Marcus's peaceful life in Chicago had been disrupted by a call. Elizabeth and Richard were gone, killed in a highway accident. He hadn't spoken to them in years, yet he felt compelled to come. What surprised him most wasn't the cold reception. It was the unexpected invitation to speak, insisted upon by Evelyn Reed, the family's attorney. For those who don't know me, Marcus said, "I'm the son never in the Christmas cards, the one missing from family photos. I was adopted at 8 after my parents died in a fire. For a short time, I believed I had found a home." He paused, his eyes drifting toward the polished pews. "Elizabeth taught me piano. Richard took me fishing. But around my 9th birthday, things shifted. I was moved to the basement, left out of family portraits, told to stay behind on vacations. By 13, I knew I wasn't part of the family. I was a tolerated guest." Some in the crowd glanced uncomfortably at Blake and Harrison. You might have asked, "Where's the other boy?" The answer was always the same: busy with school. At 17, Marcus left for college on a full scholarship. No send-off, no encouragement. Just a silent drive to the Greyhound station with Richard and a comment about the weather. That was their final conversation. Marcus built a life from scratch, an architecture degree, a thriving firm in downtown Chicago. He sent cards, invitations. They were ignored. 3 days ago, while meeting with Dr. Hartman to discuss the estate, Marcus was handed a sealed letter Elizabeth had left for him. He now held it before the silent congregation. "My dearest Marcus," he read aloud, "if you are reading this, I've left this world without making things right. I allowed you to be pushed aside in our home. It is my greatest regret." The words drew stunned silence. Blake's face darkened. Harrison looked away. Marcus continued, "Elizabeth left more than just words. She left journals, 17 volumes, one for each year since my adoption. They were hidden in a locked cabinet. The key, given to Mrs. Perkins, the housekeeper, who handed it to me when I arrived. Each journal was filled with entries, proof that Elizabeth had witnessed it all. Blake sabotaging Marcus's science project. Harrison spilling coffee on his MIT application. Elizabeth had known and done nothing. Page 42, Marcus said, turning to Blake. Blake confessed to ruining Marcus's internship. Said he'd had enough charity for being adopted. Her words, not mine. Blake sprang to his feet. "This is fiction. You're just bitter." Then explained the DNA report. Marcus said calmly, lifting the yellowed page. Elizabeth had it stored with the journals. It confirmed something she'd suspected for years. Dr. Hartman cleared his throat. Richard suffered from hereditary hemochromatosis, passed to both Blake and Harrison, but not Marcus. And yet, Marcus said, his voice steady, "Elizabeth kept me in every version of the will. And this week, Dr. Reed told me something else. My name has always been listed as a son, legally and in estate documents. Yet no one called me when they died." He looked to his brothers, whose faces were frozen in disbelief. Elizabeth kept a secret, one that changed everything. The final lines of the letter confirmed it. Richard was not Marcus's biological father, but Elizabeth was his mother. Gasps filled the room. "She gave me up after a youthful mistake, then adopted me years later after the fire that killed my adoptive parents, never telling anyone the truth. That's why Richard grew distant, why I was never fully accepted. But she couldn't bear to cut me off entirely. And that's why, as of last week, I was named the majority heir to the Richardson estate." The chapel fell into stunned silence. Blake looked like he might collapse. Harrison's head hung low. Marcus folded the letter, his voice now gentle. "I didn't come for revenge. I came for truth, and to honor the woman who, even in her failure, tried, too late, to make things right." He stepped down from the podium, the silence now charged not with tension, but reckoning. As Marcus prepared to reveal the final truth, the one that would unearth a lifetime of buried secrets, he couldn't help but think how truth, like the buildings he had designed, required an unshakable foundation. For 15 years, he had constructed a life beyond the rejection and hatred of the family he had once tried to fit into. But now, he was about to tear down the walls they had built around their distorted reality, using the very truth they had tried to bury. What this DNA report reveals, Marcus began, his voice steady, is something our mother discovered 6 years ago while seeking treatment for our father's hemochromatosis at the Mayo Clinic. The chapel fell into a heavy silence. Blake, gripping the back of the pew with white-knuckled hands, stared at Marcus. Elizabeth always suspected it, but she never had the courage to confront it. Marcus continued, his eyes locking with his brother's. When Richard required more extensive testing, a full family history was requested. That's when she discovered I wasn't the only adopted child in this family. Harrison's face turned pale, and his breath hitched. Blake isn't Richard Richardson's biological son. The word struck like a punch to the gut. Blake staggered back, his face a mixture of disbelief and fury. That's a lie. A malicious, slanderous lie. The science doesn't lie, Blake, Marcus replied calmly, raising the report. Elizabeth found out that Richard wasn't your father. And here's the bitter irony. You, who scorned me for not sharing the Richardson bloodline, find yourself in the same position. At the back of the chapel, Mrs. Perkins stood up, her face etched with years of unspoken truths. It's true. I was there the night Mrs. Richardson received the results. She cried for hours. A wave of murmurs rippled through the congregation as Blake lunged toward Marcus. But Harrison and his wife quickly restrained him. Why would our mother keep this secret? Harrison asked, his voice shaking with confusion and anger. Because she loved both of you, despite everything. Marcus answered, his gaze unwavering. And because she knew exactly how Blake would react. Just like he is now. Blake, his face twisted in rage, wrenched free from Harrison's grip and took a threatening step toward Marcus. And you expect us to believe that justifies her leaving the entire estate to you? A complete stranger. I'm not the one questioning family ties here, Blake. Marcus shot back, his voice cold. Besides, the house at 12, Maplewood Drive, isn't the only thing Elizabeth left me. Dr. Hartman cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Mr. Richardson, if I may clarify, Mrs. Richardson executed a revised will 5 years ago. In addition to the main residence, she also bequeathed Mr. Jones her controlling interest in Richardson Enterprises, 51% of all her holdings. Blake's color drained from his face. Richardson Enterprises? The century-old family business. In his hands? That's not legal. Perfectly legal, Mr. Richardson, Dr. Hartman affirmed, his tone firm. All documents have been thoroughly vetted and authenticated. Marcus folded the letter and descended from the pulpit. As he passed the paralyzed Blake in the aisle, he paused for a moment, speaking quietly, just loud enough for Blake to hear. Do you remember when I was 12 and you destroyed my prize-winning model airplane? Or when I was 17 and you told me I should be grateful for the roof over my head? Marcus' words were sharp, each one carrying years of pent-up emotion. That day, I swore I would prove my worth, not out of revenge, but for justice. Blake stood, ashen and speechless, his mouth open but unable to form a word. I didn't come here to humiliate you, Blake, Marcus continued, his voice steady but resolute. I came to honor the truth Elizabeth found the courage to embrace at the end of her life. That family is more than blood, something you've never understood. Marcus then moved past Blake and stopped beside Mrs. Perkins, who gave him a small, knowing smile. The official reading of the will will take place tomorrow at 10 a.m. at my offices at 1 Federal Plaza, Dr. Hartman announced to the stunned assembly. All are welcome to attend. As Marcus walked out of St. Jude's, accompanied by Mrs. Perkins, a strange sense of peace settled over him. There had been no shouting, no dramatic confrontations, just the quiet unveiling of a long-hidden truth. Outside, The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the well-kept lawns of the cemetery. Dr. Valentina Reyes waited by a majestic oak tree. "That was intense," she remarked as Marcus approached. Marcus glanced back at the chapel, where Blake was gesturing wildly at the lawyer, while Harrison sat slumped, his head in his hands. "It was necessary," Marcus replied simply. What no one in that room could yet comprehend was that the revelation of the DNA report was just the beginning. Within Elizabeth's journals lay even darker secrets. Secrets that would expose the true nature of Richardson Enterprises and explain why she had quietly orchestrated a transfer of power in her final years. This shift would not only shake the Richardson family to its core, but ripple through the entire Connecticut business elite. As Marcus and Valentina walked toward the parking lot, Marcus looked down at the worn leather folder in his hand. It contained not just the DNA report, but meticulously documented evidence that would reveal the true legacy Elizabeth had intended for him. A legacy buried beneath generations of secrets, lies, and prejudice masquerading as family tradition. The next morning, the conference room at Hartman and Reed buzzed with anticipation. The official reading of the will was scheduled for 10 o'clock sharp. Marcus arrived on time with Valentina. Mrs. Perkins was already seated in a quiet corner, holding a small, antique wooden box. Blake and Harrison entered together, flanked by their legal teams. Blake's jaw was set tightly, while Harrison appeared to have aged a decade overnight. Before we commenced the formal reading, Dr. Hartman announced, his voice strong and clear, "Mrs. Elizabeth Richardson left specific instructions for this video presentation to be viewed first." The large screen flickered to life, revealing Elizabeth's serene face, recorded just weeks before her passing. Despite her frail appearance, her eyes shone with determination. "If you are watching this," Elizabeth began, her voice soft yet firm, "it means I have left this world without fully confronting my deepest regrets, especially regarding you, Marcus. The way we allowed you to be treated in our home was unforgivable.